In the last video, what we did was we dropped a PDF file in GCS bucket, and then from GCS bucket, GCS created a PubSub notification trigger. That notification trigger was consumed by application integration, and then application integration went ahead and called Gemini model prompt, which we had, and then the prompt output was brought to us. Now, what we want to do next is we want to call out based on different conditions of the output of the prompt. So our prompt is very simple one. It's essentially just reading a file and giving us either green, blue, or unknown response based on whether it's a blue POS PDF file or green POS PDF file, or it's an unknown PDF file which our prompt cannot identify. So based on that, what we want to do is we want to trigger three different DocAI models, and let's call them green DocAI model or blue or unknown. And then once we get the output of this process, we want to write it to our Cloud SQL database to just have that response of the DocAI model and also the prompt response which we get, along with some other metadata regarding the file, so that we can do some more analytics or analysis on that, and then we can show those information or either on our web UI or maybe share it with some other departments who want to get this information out. So this is what we are going to do. We are going to continue from the previous demo which we did. If you have not seen, I highly recommend go and watch that, because we are just continuing on that, but we will see how to do this. Now, in the last video, we had created till here where our Cloud PubSub trigger is listening to any new file coming in. That new file, when it is dropped, we get the information out of it, like the file IDs and different information. And then we did some JavaScript where we were processing new file URI to read the data and put the content of that file into this request temp content. And then what we were doing, we were putting this information and sending it to our POS prompt, and this POS prompt is going to send us a response back, and this response is what we are going to process. So just as a reminder, let's run it once and see how it runs. So to run it, I have to put a file in GCS bucket. So let's do that. So if you remember, in the last video, we created this bucket. Within that bucket, we had Vertex AI sample folder created, and within that folder, we were dropping our files. So this is where we are going to drop one file and see how the output comes back. So I'm going to go to my folder integration POS demo here, and within that, let's drop one green sample, one PDF. And once this file is dropped here, our integration will get triggered. So let's go back to our integration. So now we can see that our integration was successfully triggered and we got a response output. And the response body is something like this, that response body, candidate, what not. And then the most important thing is what we are interested into, whether we are getting the proper status of green, blue, or this is the response we are most interested. So what we have to do, we have to parse this whole response coming back. And for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a JavaScript function, and that JavaScript function is going to process this. So now let's put our integration into edit mode and start processing the response. So I'm going to skip that version naming. So the first thing what I want to do is the response which is coming back from this POS prompt Vertex AI, I want to add it into a temp variable so that it's easy for me to call it rather than calling it with the output of connector output payload dot something and something. So instead of that, the easiest will be to just create a temporary variable. I'm going to call it POS response body string, and for now I can leave it as string because it's coming as a string, and this is what we are going to process in our JavaScript. And then we can leave the variable type as none and just let's create it. So now the variable is ready. So the next thing which we need to do is we need a data mapper, and this data mapper will essentially go here, and let's connect this to this, and it will be very simple thing. We just have to drop our POS response body string here, and then the connector output which we are getting. So now there is one issue, that it's a JSON payload which we are getting. And if you remember, if I go back and show you the logs again, so if you see this, the response is coming as a JSON, and within that there is a response body, and the text of the response is coming as a string. So this is what I want to fetch out of it. So what I will do And this is where application integration makes it very easy, that if I go back to my mapping here, from this JSON, there is a handy function available, which is get property. And within that get property, I can very easily write that fetch response body out. And this will be the string which will be stored in post response body string. And then that is what we are going to process in our JavaScript. Now let's drop a JavaScript function here. Now, one thing more I want to do is that I want to create another temporary variable. Now that temporary variable, why I want to create is the response, that green, blue, and unknown response which POS is giving. I want to store it so that it's easy to manipulate and handle it in further steps. And then for that, again, I'm going to create another temp variable. Again, it can be a variable type none, and let's leave it at string, and then we create it. Now let's go to our JavaScript. So now this is what the code I have written here. So let me explain it to what is going on here. So first thing which I do is I fetch the JSON string from our post response body string, and then use JavaScript inbuilt functionality of JSON parsing. And I'm fetching the first, because it was an array, I'm fetching the first element. And from that first element, I get the JSON string. And then I just parse it using the JSON string. And then I'm iterating over it and finding where the part.text is, and that there can be multiple part.text. So I'm putting it into an array here, and then that's the array I will get filled up with the response. And I'm interested into the first response which is there. So that is what I'm filling into post response result. And this is the new variable which we created. And if we run it once, and then we will be able to see that JavaScript is pulling it, filling it, and then let's do that. So now we made till there here, and now let's publish it and see if it is working properly or not. So now again, the same way to test it, I'm just going to upload another sample file, and we will see once the sample file is uploaded, it's available here. Now if I go back and check the logs, so now my output is processed. So let's see our JavaScript has properly processed the response, and our variable has been properly filled or not. So here you can see the POS response result is filled with green. So this is the output of our POS POS prompt, which we created in Gemini, and that is giving us that green is the output for our file processed. So now let's go back. So now next steps is that we got the output of the prompt, and we are getting green, blue, or unknown output. Now we need to call a separate DocAI model, and to do this, we are going to use conditional statement, and that is the next step. And then I also need a sample DocAI model or a processor running in DocAI, because it's not a DocAI tutorial. So you can go and create multiple processors in DocAI. You can go and create multiple processors depending on your use case. What I did, I just created a very simple document OCR processor, and I will be using the same processor for different conditions. But if you have multiple processors which you want to call, that is what you can call using application integration. So here is my processor which is running, which I have called POS green DocAI sample. I have not done anything. It is out of the box processor which is available, and these are the information which we will need, like the ID of the processor, the region it is running, and these are the information which we are going to use while calling DocAI from our application integration, and I will show you how to do that as well. So let's drop DocAI processor, the task. So application integration provides you out of the box different processors which you can call for DocAI, like process, operation, batch, process, and all. So I'm going to use DocAI process. I will drop this here. So for now, let's call it green DocAI. And as you can see, if we have green, so similarly we will have blue and unknown one also. Now let's set it up and see how we can run it. So the first thing this DocAI processor is asking is an authentication profile. Now what this is that you need to call it using a service account to give an identity whether your application integration is able to make a call to your DocAI process which you have created, and this could be running in different projects and all. So you need to give access, and what roles are required. So now I am in DocAI process task, and it is giving you all the information what is required. So the roles which you require is the service account which you will have should be able to have this role of process online and processor version. So these are the roles which you need to give. So that is what we are going to do, and let's see how we have done that. So now, if you remember, in previous video, I created this pause prompt test service account, and this is the service account we were using to give access to our pub sub, our GCS bucket, and everywhere else. So we will use the same service account, and we will create a authentication profile. And for permission, if I go to IAM here and search for my pause service account, I gave it a document AI administrator, which covers those roles and access which was required. You can go more granular and give it very specific access which you want. So that is what I have done here. Now this is the service account which I'm going to use in my integration. So you can create an authentication profile. As you can see, I already have a pause prompt test SA service account created. It is very simple. Just show you what is the information here. So if I gave it a profile name, the region where I want to create service account, and also gave it the scope of Google APIs.com or Google Cloud Platform. So this is the scope you can use, and then just give it a service account. And then what will happen is whenever application integration is making a call to your DocAI processor, it will send this authentication tokens and code, and then DocAI can either accept or reject based on whether that service account has access to it or not. So the other inputs which we need to give is the region, and this information, if you remember, we can get from here. I created my processor in EU, so I will mention EU here, and then the project ID, the project where my my DocAI processor is running is again in the project standalone project here. It could be anywhere else also, so I will give that. Again, you can create variables, config variables out of it. You do not have to directly give it as I'm hard coding it here, but again, it's a demo, so we are going to use that. Now the next thing is the ID, and this is the ID you need to provide. Again, I'm going to go back here, put that processor ID. Now this is all configured. Now there are a few other things which are required to give this DocAI as input. And if you go and check here, the request green DocAI has some information required to make a call. So my document AI can process either a GCS bucket file, or it can process a base 64 encoded PDF file which you can give, and it will respond back with the different information regarding that. Now to do that, either you can put it in a raw document and then set the MIME type as application/PDF or content, or you can send it as an inline document, or you can send it as a URI for GCS bucket. But remember that the GCS bucket URI, if you send, it will be an asynchronous process where you send the file, DocAI will process it and give you a execution ID, then you go back and based on that execution ID you fetch. But that is what not we want to do. I want to do it synchronously when my process is running. So I need to send the content of the PDF file. Now to get the content of the PDF file, application integration again makes it very easy that I have a GCS connector created. Already I can use that GCS connector to fetch the content of the PDF file. So now before even I go to Green Doc AI, I need to fetch the information from GCS bucket. So let's do that first. Let's configure this, and creating a GCS connector is also very easy. You just need to have a service account. So let me go and show you how did I created that. So similar to any other connector in application integration, you can select different service account, and this service account, because it is the default service account of my compute and it has access to GCS bucket, so it was given the grants, and then it's in the project ID and no authentication, nothing, just with the service account cloud identity, my connector will be able to get information from my GCS bucket, and that is what I'm going to use. Now I have selected standalone GCS connector. Now the next thing is entity or action. So what I want to do is I don't want to create anything. I just want to fetch information from my file. from my GCS bucket. So the option which I have to select is actions. With that action, I want to select what I want to download an object. So this is the operation which I want to perform. I'm going to click on done here. Now our GCS connector is created, but before we go to GCS connector, it requires some information like bucket needs to be set, the object file path needs to be set, and then has byte object has to be set. This has byte is for whether you want to download it as in binary data, or it's a text file, or it's a PDF file, or it's an image file, depending on that whether you want to get download it as bytes or just plain text. This is the variable which we need to set. Now to do this, again we will drop a data mapping. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop the required things which we need to set for the GCS bucket. First thing is bucket itself, then the object file path, and then has bytes. So now, next what we want to do, we want to set the bucket name itself. To do that, I'm going to create a config variable. So let's call that as config GCS pos bucket, not config, GCS pos bucket, and the variable type will be config here. And what's my bucket name? My bucket name is standalone IP something which I created, and I'm going to put that here, create this. Now choose my variable config post bucket. Now this is my bucket name setup. Now if you remember, we had already set up object ID from GCS to do our prompt injection when we were sending our prompt to our Gemini. So that's the value which we need to set as the file path. And this file path is essentially the file path which you see here, that standalone IP and then this name. If I copy this, so it will be Vertex AI sample slash the file name which we already have set up. And I will show you once we run it, and you will be able to see the value. Now this has byte is very easy to set. I can go to value, select Boolean here, and then I want to make it true. Again, this setup is to tell it that I want to download the file data in binary format, and that binary format data I need to send it to my DocAI, and then we are going to use that. So let's connect this to this. Now we have GCS file data coming out. Now the GCS file data, because it's coming as binary data, we need to fetch it out of GCS response itself. Now to do that, I'm going to put another data mapping. And this data mapping is for setting the DocAI, green DocAI input. And let's connect this. And we will connect this also, and let's call it, open this one. Now if you remember, I have to set some request parameters here, and the request parameters are essentially in the request of green doc, which is first is MIME type. I'm going to drop this MIME type here and set it as hard-coded value for now, but you can very easily make it a config variable and use it from there. Now we have set up the MIME type. The next thing is we need to set this content of base64 encoded inline document content here. And this we are going to set from the output of the GCS connector. The output of GCS connector is a JSON array. And within JSON array, I'm going to do get element first. And this element will be the first element we want to fetch. I'm going to change it to integer. Now within that element, I need to get a property. That property is essentially named as content bytes. And since it's a bytes, I'm going to convert it into a string and set it into an inline document content itself. And then based on that, we will get a response out of our DocAI itself. So we did a lot of things. So it's always a good idea to test it. So let's publish it and test it whether our integration is properly running or not. And as usual, I'm going to go to my bucket and drop a file. And this time let's drop a green sample 3. Now the file is uploaded. Let's go and check the logs. So I'm getting an error which is saying invalid bucket name. So I think I made a mistake. Let's go and check what mistake we did and let's fix it. Oh, okay. So I have a space here in my bucket name. While copy pasting, I made a mistake. So let's fix it and run it again and test it. So I'm going to go to my post bucket and make changes to this value, remove that space and do a publish again. Now let's drop another file here. So now file is uploaded. Let's go back again and check the logs. This time it's running, it's in progress. So let's refresh again. Now everything has successfully executed. Let's go and see the response here. So what happened here is we processed post prompt, we mapped the response to a string, JSON output, and then we set the GCS fetch, and then we read the content of the file. We call the green doc response here, and then green doc was called. Now here is the response coming from our document AI, where it says document MIME type application PDF, and it went ahead and read the whole file of our binary data or base64 encoded file, and it's giving us a lot of response out. Now this is the response we are going to process and write it to Cloud SQL. But before that, we need to make some change here. If you remember, our use case was that based on different green, blue, and unknown, we want to process different DocAI model itself. So that is what we are going to do now. Another thing which I want to show you here is that if you notice in the logs that I have some success here, but there are something strange happening where I'm getting this integration triggered and some failed response. And this is happening because when we delete files, we have not done any filtering of the event which are coming from storage. So there are two ways you can do. The notification trigger which I have set up is also not filtered. Essentially, I am sending everything to PubSub whenever anything happens in Cloud GCS. So instead of that, I can either go and filter the events which are triggered to PubSub, and also in application integration also, you can see the information which is coming in from the bucket storage itself. And there is a type of notification like object delete and all. So we want to filter it not based on we don't want to execute any integration when object is delete. We want to do it on object finalize, and the object finalize event is the one which essentially is whenever a new file is created. So what I will do, I will go and create a condition here, and this is the condition which I will check and process it based on it. So let's implement that logic before we go and implement other conditional logic here. Now to do that, what I'm going to create a temporary variable and call it GCS object event type, and I will leave it as string itself, and then create this variable. Now if you remember, we had this PubSub data mapping which we were creating, and we will go there and fill this information here, the GCS object type. And where can I get this GCS object type? The payload or the PubSub trigger message data which we had. Within that, there will be attribute, and this is the event type which we need. Now this PubSub trigger message data attributes event type will have that object create, object finalize, and whatnot. So that is what we are going to use. And then very easily I can go here and write that condition that GCS object type when it is equal to object finalize. And how did I get into this? So if I go to PubSub notification for Google Cloud Storage, there is this object finalize, and this is the value for which I want to do. And this is what I have done here, that object finalize is the one I want to check, and let's call it. And then now anything else will not run, and we will not waste our resources. So now the similar thing which we need to do is we need to call this whenever we are setting up for calling green or green doc AI. I want to add a condition here, and this condition will be essentially when it is green, And then if you remember, the green, blue, and all responses we are storing into pause response result, and I can just do when it is green, then only execute it, otherwise don't execute. And similarly, I can set up another data mapper um, for our blue one. Let's call it setup for blue, and then another DocAI process which might be blue one, and we call it blue DocAI. And when we add this condition here, and similar to this condition, this time I am going to make the condition as blue, and then we connect and call this blue docai. Again, for now, I'm calling it with same information, but it could be different for you. I'm using the same setup which I did for green, but if you have different processor, you can very easily call that as well. Let's very quickly set this up. And similar to what we were doing, setting it up for green one, let's set it up for blue. And this time, if I go, I have a request for blue doc itself inline, and I need to set up the blue MIME type, and I need to set up the content for this. Again, let's call it application slash PDF. And as you remember, we set up the connector output payload for GCS. The same thing, get element value as, and then next get property, and this will be content bytes, and then toString. That's it. So now we have set up for green and blue. Let's filter it out, and similarly you can create for others as well. So now, as next step, what we are going to do is we have got our prompt. Based on that prompt, we created green and blue, and then we are calling two different docAIs. And now, as next step and the final step, what I want to do is I want to store it into a Cloud SQL database, my response of Gemini prompt, my response from DocAI, and other metadata which I have from Cloud Google storage itself. And then that is what our final step will be, and we will write it into Cloud SQL. Now in Cloud SQL, I have created an SQL instance. There's nothing special about it. It is a simple Cloud SQL database. I created a table, which is nothing special. Again, docAI output is my database name. Within that, my table name is pos file metadata. And then right now, my database is empty. So there is nothing inside here. So this is the database we want to fill from the output of our process itself. And then when I go to my connector, so this is my connector which I have created, pos file metadata cloud SQL connection. It has a service account and the region where my database is running, the instance ID, and the database name with which application integration is going to go and fetch all the schema, database names, and everything, and then show us as metadata which we can use to fill this. So let's get started with this and then fill this database. So to do this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop a connector, and I'm going to put it here and call it as, and then let's configure this. Click on configure connector, go to Europe West 2 where my connector is running, and it is pos file metadata cloud SQL connection. Click next. This time I'm going to select entity. It's not an action. We want to update an entity, and for now only table I have is pos file metadata, and within that pos file metadata, what I want to do is I want to create a new record. So create and click on done. Now this database is ready here, and when we drop this, there was an input prompt created or input payload created. So this is write connector input payload. And within that, if I go, I have pos type. This is the green, blue, or unknown, or the response which we are getting from created date, ID, file name, GCS URI, and file text. This is the file text which I want to fetch from the DocAI response. So DocAI is giving us some data, and that data also I want to store into my Cloud SQL. And to do that, what I need to do, I need to fetch that information from the response of green DocAI. And to do that, I'm going to create a temp variable to use, and I'm going to call it doc OCR text data. Again, very simple, nothing fancy here. Again, going to data mapping, open this data mapper, doc OCR text here, and then the output of our the response which we are getting from green doc. Within that, there is a element called document. Within that, I have a text element, and this is the text element I just want to map into doc OCR text data. And then I go back, connect this to DocAI. And now I need to set up information to go to my blue result or my blue result to Cloud SQL. So I could do it in the same mapper, but to keep it clean, I'm going to drop another data mapper. And this time, this data mapper will be, let's open this up and drop this. First, we need post type, then we need created date, then we need file name. ID is auto-generated, so we do not have to do anything about it. Then GCS URI, and then file text. So let's set this up. So first is post type, and if you remember, our post type was post response result. Then created date is for to create date. What we can do, we can use a function called now in millis. So this will give you time in milliseconds, and because it's a string type, we need to give it a string in a YYMMDD hours, minutes, and second. So that is what we are going to do. To do that, there is a function called epoch to human readable, and here you can provide for the format, and that is the format which we are going to use. So I will give the format as YYMMDDHHMM save, and also give the time zone, and the time zone will be GMT. And the next thing I need to do is to set the file name, and the file name, if you remember, was our object ID from GCS, and that is here. And then GCS URI we needed to set, and that was prompt input file URI which we had set up, so we got that. And the last thing was our response result, the data which we had created just now, and that was doc, if I can find the variable here, doc OCR text data. And with this we have set it up, and now it is going to write to our um, Cloud SQL database. And let's connect this up, format it, and similarly we can do the same thing for to set it up on the blue side. So let's very quickly do that as well, and then we will trigger and test it. So another data mapper. So what I have done, I have created this blue and green doc, processing the response in the similar way, adding it to the same doc OCR text output, and in this also, but I'm getting it from different response. From green, it's coming from green doc, and for blue, it is coming from blue doc, which it is not. So I need to correct this. So let's go back here. And for green, it should be green. And oh, I corrected the wrong one. So let's go here, remove this green one, and add the text from green here. And for blue, it will be from blue doc. The blue doc. And just for the sake of clarity, I'm going to change it, get blue OCR text response, and let's change it to get green OCR text response, and map POS SQL data. It's the same thing again. I'm repeating it here and then writing to Cloud SQL. So now let's publish it and test it once. So again, the same thing. I'm going to go and drop a file here. This time, let's upload green sample 2. This time what should happen is once the file is uploaded, our integration should get triggered and we should be able to see some data in our instance here for Cloud SQL. So let's see whether execution was completed successfully or not. So here our Cloud SQL task was completed. Everything worked properly. We went through green doc, and then let's go to our integration here in Cloud SQL. If I run this, so now I have a file name Vertex AI sample and GCS URI, not the file text. Let's test that, what happened with that, and we will check it, and the green and the other data. So let's see why our file text was not filled, and we will fix it and execute it again. Oh, okay. So here is the problem. In my data mapper, I was setting docOCR text from request. It should not be request, it should be the response. So if I go to my response for, it was blue, I guess. So if I go to document and response and fetch this text here and move this around here and go back, let's check it. Oh, namings are all wrong. Let's fix this also. This is blue and this one is green. Open mapping, response document, it's not from blue. I need to fix it from green. So this is the thing which you also need to take care of, that you are mapping proper values to proper items. And this time let's publish it again. Now let's test it once again. I'm going to go to my bucket and drop a file called as green sample 3. File is uploaded. Let's go here, check the logs. Now again it will processed, and just to test if our data is returned properly, we will do this select again, and this time I have file text also coming from DocAI. Now we have successfully processed the whole integration where it started from a PDF file getting dropped in GCS bucket, pubs up getting triggering application integration calling Gemini, getting the output of the prompt, and based on that output values we have dynamically processed different data from green, blue, or unknown DocAI, and then writing those results to our Cloud SQL. So this is how you can process and call and get data from GCS and write it to your Cloud SQL using DocAI or prompt, Gemini prompt, or all those things. Thank you.